parameter passing, pass by value and pass by reference in the concepts of functions in the subject Programming in C. Myself, Dr. S.P. Sudha, Professor and HOD CSE, Dr. NGP Institute of Technology, presenting this video for you. C enables its programmers to break up a program into segments, commonly known as functions, each of which can be written more or less independently of the others. Every function in the program is supposed to perform a well-defined task. Every function has a name which acts as an interface to the outside world in terms of how information is transferred to it and how results generated by the function are transmitted back from it. In the following figure, we can see there are two functions. One is the main function and another is a sub-function named as function 1. Main function calls another function, function 1, to perform a well-defined task. Main is called the calling function and function 1 is called as a called function. There are two ways in which arguments or parameters can be passed to the called function. They are call by value and call by reference. In call by value, the values of the variables are passed by the calling function to the called function, and in the call by reference, the address of the variables are passed by the calling function to the called function. In the call by value method, the called function creates new variables to store the values of the arguments passed to it. Therefore, the called function uses only a copy of the actual arguments to perform its intended task. If the called function is supposed to modify the value of the parameters passed to it, then the changes will be reflected only in the called function and will not be reflected in the calling function. Now we can see a small illustration for the call by value technique. This program shows how we are swapping two numbers A and B with the help of call by value. Now, there are two functions here. One is the main function and there is a swap subfunction. In the main function, we are taking two variables A and B which are declared as integer type, and we are scanning those two variables in the main function. Now we are trying to print the values of A and B before calling that subfunction called as swap. And now the swap function is called. Now the swap function will take the values of A and B and it stores the values in the variables called N1 and N2. So N1 and N2 will take only the copy of the values of A and B. Now we will do the swapping in the subfunction with our temporary variable called as C, where C takes the value of N1, N1 takes the value of N2 and N2 takes the value of C. Now here in the subfunction the swapping is done. Now I return back the control to the main function. Now I am trying to print the values of A and B in the main function. Now the result shows that before calling the function and after calling the function, the values are the same. It means that the values are only passed to the subfunction where the values are utilized by the subfunction and is not reflected in the main function. So the main function will have its own copy and the subfunction will have its own copy. So no change is reflected in the main function for the method call by value. In the call by reference technique, we declare the function parameters as references rather than normal variables. When this is done, any changes made by the function to the arguments it received are visible by the calling function. Now we'll see the same example, the swap function, which takes now the arguments as the pointers, not as the values. Now we can see that we have two functions again. Main is the function which calls the swap function. Swap take the two variables which is not the values, which takes the pointers of that A and B. So that we have given that is ampersand A comma ampersand B. So instead of passing the values A and B to the subfunction, the arguments passed as a references. That is pointers of A and B are passed to the subfunction. Now we can see in the subfunction we have declared two variables called N1 and N2. They are the pointers which holds the address of the A and B. Now in the subfunction, now we can see that we have taken a temporary variable c, which takes a value of that n1 which is pointed by it, and n1 stores the value of n2 and n2 stores the value of c. Now here c is given to be equal to the asterisk of n1. It means that n1 is declared as a pointer variable. Now if I give c is equal to asterisk of n1, it means the value pointed to the variable n1 will be stored in the c. So it means that the actual values which is stored in the memory are replaced now. So in the call by value method, only the values are passed, and in the call by reference method, the address values are actually passed. So since the address is actually passed, whatever changes you do with the address, it will be reflected both in the main function and in the subfunction. Now we can see in the main function, I have given a printf statement. The values before calling a function is a and b, and after that the printf, the values after the function is given as a and b. Now we can see that values are swapped. So initially the value was 3 and 2, and after calling the function the values are 2 and 3. So this is the best example of the call by reference technique. So I thank all of you for the patient listening for these concepts. Thank you.